If you're over 70 and you're still going to bed whenever you feel like it, you need to hear this before tonight, because there is one specific hour on the clock that a massive study followed for years, and it was tied to something nobody expects: longer life or a shorter one. And the wild part is, it has nothing to do with how many hours you sleep. It is about the exact moment you close your eyes. So stick with me, because by the end of this, you will know the window your body has been quietly asking for this whole time. And most people are missing it by just enough to matter. Here is the thing. Everyone tells you 8 hours of sleep. That is the goal, right? Get your 8 hours, and you're fine, except researchers who tracked over 88,000 adults for years using wrist sensors that measured the exact minute. People fell asleep, found something strange. People were sleeping the same total hours, but their risk of heart problems was different. And the only variable that lined up was the clock, not the count, and that is the open loop we are chasing tonight. What hour and why does your body care so much about a number on a clock? Think about your body for a second, not as a machine that just needs rest, but as a house with a very strict night shift crew. When the sun goes down, a hormone called melatonin starts rising quietly in the background. It is not just a sleep switch, it is more like a foreman that tells every other system, get ready. We are doing repairs tonight. Blood pressure is supposed to dip about 10 to 20% while you sleep. Doctors literally call this dipping, and it matters because that dip is when your heart gets a break from the pressure of the day. If you go to bed too late, that dip gets rushed, compressed, cut short, like a repair crew getting kicked out of the building before the job is done. But here is the part that surprises people: going to bed too early can be just as disruptive as going to bed too late, because your body is not just waiting for darkness. It is running on an internal clock, trained by decades of habit. If you force sleep hours before that clock is ready, you're not syncing with your rhythm. You're fighting it, and over time that fighting shows up as fragmented sleep. More waking through the night and less of that deep repair stage where your brain clears out waste products. A process scientists call glymphatic clearance, basically your brain's nightly cleaning service. And that service runs best in specific sleep stages that are timed to your natural rhythm, not whenever you happen to lie down. So researchers looked at this exact question across a large population: what time window showed the lowest risk for cardiovascular issues? And the answer landed in a fairly narrow zone, somewhere between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. People who fell asleep in that window showed lower risk compared to people who fell asleep earlier than 10 or later than midnight. And before you panic, if your bedtime is a little outside, that this is not a hard deadline like a train leaving the station. It is a pattern found across a large group of people, not a rule carved in stone for every single body. But it does point to something real. Your cardiovascular system seems to prefer a predictable middle ground. Not too early, not too late. Now here's a twist that flips the whole conversation. The people who went to bed after midnight had higher risk, which most people expect, but the people who went to bed very early before 10 p.m. also showed higher risk than the 10 to 11 group. And that surprises almost everyone, because we assume earlier is always safer. Earlier is always healthier, right? Except your circadian rhythm is not just about darkness. It is about your entire day's rhythm, your light exposure, your meal timing, your activity level, all feeding into when your body is actually ready to shut down. For repairs, going to bed too far ahead of that internal readiness can mean lighter, more fragmented sleep, even if the total hours look fine on paper. Let's ground this in something real. Think about jet lag for a second. You have felt this. You land in a new time zone. Your watch says it is bedtime, but your body is wide awake. Or the opposite, your body wants to shut down, but the room is telling you it is the middle of the afternoon. That mismatch between clock time and body time is exactly what happens on a smaller scale every single night. When your bedtime drifts too far from your natural rhythm, you're creating a tiny nightly version of jet lag. And after 70, your body has less flexibility to absorb that mismatch the way it did at 30. So what actually helps you land closer to that window without forcing it artificially light exposure in the morning is one of the strongest resets for your internal clock. Even 10 minutes of natural daylight shortly after waking helps tell your brain when the day started, which helps your brain calculate when the day should end. Consistency matters more than perfection. Going to bed around the same time every night, even on weekends, trains that internal clock to expect sleep at a specific hour instead of guessing, and dimming lights in the 2 hours before your target bedtime supports the natural rise of melatonin instead of suppressing it with bright artificial light, which is one of the most common silent disruptors in modern homes. Here is the climax of everything we have covered. Your bedtime is not just a personal preference. It is a signal you are sending your entire body every single night, and after 70, that signal carries more weight, because your body has less buffer to compensate for mismatched timing. The 10 to 11 p.m. window is not magic, it is simply where a large group of human bodies tended to sync best with their own internal repair schedule. And the goal was never to memorize an exact minute. The goal is to stop treating bedtime as an afterthought and start treating it as one of the biggest levers you still fully control at any age. If this shifted the way you think about your own nightly routine hit, like so this reaches more people who need to hear it, subscribe. If you want more science broken down like this in plain human language, and drop a comment telling me what time you actually go to bed most nights. I read these and I'm curious how close we all are to that window C. You in the next one.